Okay. I think we are now live. All right. Good evening, everybody. I started a few minutes early today just so we can give everyone a little more time to get here. Sometimes it takes a little while for people to arrive. So I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that everything is technologically set. 1 minute. Okay. All right. Good evening. It's about 2 minutes to 9, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I know it's a little bit early, but this way we can answer all of our questions that have been posted in advance, and then we can get started on the live questions. So for those of you who may be here for the first time, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Dr. Jessica Freedman. I am an emergency physician. I am the chair and founder of Med Edits Medical Admissions, which I founded shortly after leaving the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, where I was on faculty, both the emergency medicine faculty, the medical school faculty, and I worked in medical school admissions and residency admissions, as well as I also did some work in medical school curriculum and in various committees. I did a lot of things at Mount Sinai. I left the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, and I worked clinically in the community and founded MedEdit simultaneously. And we have continued to grow over the past, I think, 16 plus years. And that has enabled me and my entire team to really understand the trends in medical admissions, which we then pass on to all of you through things like these Q&As, through our Facebook group, which if you are not a member of, I would encourage you to join it. And then, of course, we pass that on to our students whom we work with as young. Some of them were, or even in high school, whom we're helping with BSMD programs. We certainly work with a lot of undergraduates who are in the pre-med process or getting ready to apply to medical school. And then, of course, we work with residency applicants, current medical students, as well as residents who are applying for fellowships. So we work with students throughout the entire continuum of medical education. And that's what we've been doing ever since MedEdits was founded. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to head on over to our Facebook page, and every Thursday before I start these lives, I always ask if people have questions that they want to ask in advance, and that enables people to post questions if for some reason they're not able to attend, and then they can watch the recording. I also am on the Facebook group literally every single day. We have more than 4,500 members of that group. I encourage you to join if you are not a part of it. I do answer questions within the group literally every single day. And, we also have a lot of very informed members who, have their own experiences, then they contribute to that group as well. So if you're not a part of that group, please join the group. Okay. So Sanika asks when to start preparing for the MCAT. So when you are preparing for the MCAT, the first thing you want to think about, and when you're sort of making up your overall timeline, is when are you going to have all of the courses that are required to be prepared for the MCAT? Every once in a while, we'll talk to someone who says, look, I haven't yet taken physics, but I think that I'm pretty good at physics based on my high school physics. So I'm just going to take the MCAT before I've actually enrolled in physics. And we discourage students from doing this. We really want you to have taken all of the prerequisites before you start preparing for the MCAT. And then you want to start preparing for the MCAT when you know you are going to have a set amount of time to be able to dedicate to that preparation. Most students need a total, depending on the student, need a total of like 350 to 500 hours of preparation to really adequately prepare for the MCAT. That's going to include doing content review. It's going to include doing strategy, and then, kind of, really focusing and zoning in on any areas where you might have some weaknesses or where you might need to improve. So the vast majority of students, I would say, prepare for the MCAT over a summer. Usually it's going to be the summer between the junior and senior year of college. And that's when students plan on applying to medical school at the end of their senior year of college, and they take one gap year, or they typically will take it between the sophomore and junior years of college in that summer. And then those are for students who are potentially applying to medical school as traditional applicants, which really aren't traditional anymore, students who are applying at the end of junior year. Now, we also most definitely have students who are able to dedicate the amount of time that they need to study and prepare for the MCAT during the course of the school year. Not everyone has the time to do this, depending on what your other commitments are, but certainly we will have students who are able to prepare for the MCAT and take it sometime during the spring, most typically, before they actually apply to medical school. But the most important thing is to take the MCAT after you've taken all your prerequisites, and when you're going to have a really nice block of time to be able to devote to that preparation, and to be able to not only devote a large quantity of time, but a very steady amount of time. So you're devoting, so you're really studying literally 5 to 6 days a week. It's a mammoth test, so it's really important. Okay, Marta asks, should we give our letter writers a copy of our resume and personal statement, or is the resume sufficient? So when it comes to asking for letters of recommendation, and if you're applying to medical school this spring, you should be doing this now, or very, very soon. We do not take sort of a cookie cutter approach to anything. And so when you are asking for letters of recommendation, you want to ask your letter writer, what would you like from me? I'm happy to send you my resume. Some people are going to call it a CV. I'm happy to send you my personal statement. I'm happy to meet with you if that would be helpful. So most professors, most letter writers who are accustomed to writing letters of recommendation, they have their own way of doing things. And so you sort of want to offer enough to make their job as easy as possible, but then you kind of want to leave the ball in their court so that they can tell you what they need from you, that's going to make their job the easiest. Sorry, I forgot I didn't plug in my microphone, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Even though I know you can all hear me anyway, but this might make things a little bit clearer. Okay, so that's generally how we recommend asking for letters of recommendation, is to leave that up to the letter writer. What information do they want from you? And make their job as easy as possible. Those are sort of the two things. And you want to make sure, especially if you're applying to medical school this spring, you want to make sure that you give that letter writer enough time to write a letter of recommendation. Please do not wait until the last minute. Don't wait until May, when they are going to be bombarded with letter requests. And also remember that once your working relationship with a professor or a principal investigator is over, you can ask for a letter of recommendation at that point. So not every letter has to be written. Let's say in 2024, if let's say you had a professor last year who wrote you a letter in 2023 and you haven't worked with that professor since 2023, it's perfectly fine if that letter is dated 2023. Sometimes people say that all the letters must be dated in the year that you're applying, and that simply isn't true. Okay. Jennifer asks, Florida university that prepares you best or has the best success rate of getting kids into med school. So when we are looking at undergraduate college success rates, first of all, the best information you're going to get regarding that is going to be from the college itself. However, you need to keep in mind that you have no idea how many students started out as pre-meds at that undergraduate college and how many of them actually ended up applying to medical school. There are many people who enter college thinking, I'm going to be pre-med. They take a prerequisite class or they find something else that interests them and they decide to go in a different direction. So sometimes those numbers aren't always so accurate in terms of how successful that school is in getting their students into medical school. And another thing is you want to be able to delineate when a school gives you their success rates. Well, which students are going to osteopathic med schools, which students are going to allopathic med schools, and does that make a difference to you in terms of what their success rates are? Obviously, the most selective colleges, the colleges that are the most competitive, the most difficult to get into, are going to select very competitive, very driven students. So those schools are naturally going to have higher success rates. Don't be fooled by that. I try to really emphasize when people ask, where should I go to college? If you are pre-med, it does not matter where you go to college. You can be equally successful no matter where you go to undergraduate college. So if finances are an issue and you don't want to be spending, $70,000 a year on tuition, and you have a great flagship state university where you're going to have access to amazing resources, you're going to have research, you're going to have all of the resources that you're going to have at maybe a more elite school, but that's going to save you $80,000 a year. Why not consider going to that state university? So you can be successful regardless of where you go to undergraduate college. And I can tell you that we work with students from a whole range of undergraduate colleges who are equally successful. And again, there's no formula. So just keep that in mind as you're making your decision. Okay. Linda asks, how do med schools look at NIH internships? NIH internships are terrific. Don't think of things in terms of how does a school look at this program. It's about creating an area of interest, establishing an area of interest. So is what the student's interested in, is that offered at the NIH? Is that something that they can explore at the NIH? Or is the student sort of doing an NIH internship in order to find an area of interest? And then after they have that internship, what do they do with what they learned while they were there? How do they further pursue that area of interest that started at the NIH, right? So there isn't sort of any one thing that is going to kind of be the golden ticket to get a student into medical school. It's sort of more about establishing those areas of interest and how is the student exploring those areas of interest, and how does that fit in their sort of overall narrative and their overall trajectory. So when we're working with students, we're really trying to draw this out of them and to figure out where their areas of interest are, how can we build on those, and sort of what are the common threads between their experiences and how did one experience lead to the next. Okay, Tara says, my daughter got into Cal Poly Pomona, congratulations, as a bio major, and we think that is honestly a valid option for her at this point. I was wondering if you know about the medical school admissions rates for the school and how their pre-med program is, since it's especially an engineering-based school. So again, Cal Poly Pomona, great school. The student can certainly get some fabulous experiences at that undergraduate college. They can also go outside of the school to get some experiences regarding research if for whatever reason the student's area of research does not exist at Cal Poly. But certainly that would be a fabulous option. Like I said earlier, there is no sort of better or worse option when it comes to undergraduate colleges. We are firm believers that you can be a success and that you can do well at any undergraduate college in the United States. Okay, so now I'm going to move to our questions that you are posting live. So if you do have questions, just please post them, into the chat or into the comment box, wherever you're watching this from, and I'm going to see them. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move to those questions now. Okay. How many recommended but not required courses should applicants take? Thinking about genetics, microbiome, calculus, anatomy, physiology. This is a fantastic question. We get a lot of questions about medical school requirements. So When you start really diving into what the medical school requirements are for each individual medical school, there are going to be variations, but there are going to be some common threads between a lot of the medical schools. So we recommend that students take the courses that are recommended by a majority of medical schools. So that's going to be bio, 2 semesters of bio. If you're on a quarter system, it's obviously a little bit different. You should be taking whatever sequence is recommended by your undergraduate institution. Sometimes institutions sort of have their own distinctive sequences. So you want to find out what those might be at your school. But you want to be taking biology, you want to be taking inorganic or general chemistry. There's sometimes those terms are used interchangeably. You want to be taking organic chemistry, physics. You want to be taking biochemistry. Some medical schools are going to require genetics, so we certainly recommend genetics. And some medical schools are going to require math. Now, if you've placed out of calculus using AP credit, that's okay, but you still want to be taking some math in college, whether that be statistics or biostatistics. That's what we would recommend. But of course, if you want to take upper level calculus, if calculus is your thing, then by all means, that's going to satisfy a math requirement as well. And then so there are also going to be some medical schools that are going to want to see English or humanities. Many of those medical schools that require that are going to accept AP credits. So you want to look carefully, sort of if you have specific medical schools in mind, you want to know what their requirements are. Now, there are some medical schools that are moving towards what we call competency-based admission. So they don't want to see specific actual classes. They're okay. For example, if you, let's say, are one of these students who took 15 AP classes and you placed out of bio and you placed out of chemistry and you placed out of calculus, right? They're okay with that as long as you take upper level classes in those disciplines to demonstrate competency in the discipline. Okay. Now, since all medical schools have not moved towards competency-based admissions, we still encourage students to take those sort of classic prerequisites that have been classic prerequisites for a very, very long time. When it comes to, classes like microbiome, anatomy, physiology, those the students should take if it fits in their schedule, if those courses interest them. Those are not going to be required by most medical schools. And, you can sort of take recommended with a grain of salt by sort of looking at what most other medical schools require. So if there sort of is an outlier, so something like anatomy or physiology, which you're going to have in medical school, you're going to learn your physiology and anatomy, in medical school, those aren't necessarily required. And plus, a lot of undergraduate colleges don't offer those classes, especially if we're talking about, some of the smaller liberal arts colleges, which, definitely send a lot of students to medical school. Do selective schools look at selective undergraduates? So again, the great equalizer is the MCAT. So let's say FSU just came out tonight. I know the college admissions process because I know about that too. So FSU, let's say, just came out tonight. So let's say you go to FSU and you have a 4.0 and you have a 523 on the MCAT. Let's say you go, I don't know. Let's say you go to Duke, all right, a very competitive elite college, and you have a 4.0 and you have a 523 on the MCAT. Does that 523 from FSU, is that perceived differently than a 523 from Duke? No, it's not. And this is why the MCAT is so vitally important. And it is the great equalizer when it comes to students from different undergraduate colleges. So I would say that probably selective colleges, there was probably a little bit more, they held a little bit more cachet in the medical school admissions process, when we're talking like 15, 20 years ago. But I'd say over the past several years, that really is no longer the case. Now, if you go to a very competitive undergraduate college that's also very selective, is that going to be respected? Absolutely. But does it mean that if you don't go to a really competitive college, that you're not going to have a chance at a very competitive medical medical school? No, it doesn't mean that. And I can tell you that we work with students every year who go to very, very selective colleges, and sometimes they don't do as well as our students who have gone to less selective colleges. So don't think that where you go to college matters in terms of your overall outcomes. Yas asks, Rutgers Honors versus Georgetown for pre-med. Rutgers Honors is a full ride. Rutgers is an amazing school. It is one of the best state schools in the country. And when you throw an honors program into that, if your student has the option to go to an honors program where they're going to get, early registration to classes, they're going to potentially have research opportunities that aren't offered to other students. They're potentially going to have more advising. So honors college students tend to have a lot of perks. And so if you're telling me that, Yas, that your student got into Rutgers Honors College versus Georgetown's a very expensive undergraduate college, and they have a full ride to Rutgers, I would have a hard time saying that they shouldn't take that offer. I don't feel that, assuming that they do well and they take advantage of all of those opportunities at the Rutgers Honors College, I don't, that actually might put them in a better position, in all honesty, than going to Georgetown. So I'd have a hard time passing up that offer for a pre-med student. Absolutely. Now, if you told me you wanted to go into politics or international relations, I might have, a different opinion, but for pre-med, that's a great option, certainly. Are dental schools as rigorous and competitive as med schools? No, they are not. They're not going to be as competitive. Are they as rigorous once you're there? Yes. Is the pre-dental curriculum just as rigorous as the pre-med curriculum? Absolutely. But in terms of the admissions criteria, it's going to be a bit, I don't like using the word easier because nothing is easy. It's going to be a little bit less competitive to get into dental school than it is to get into med school. I don't know that data right off the top of my head, though. Okay, what about the Temple Pre-Med Health Scholar interview? Do they interview who are already selected to the program, or do they refine their pick after the interview? If you can just clarify if you're talking about the Pre-Med Health Scholar program, is that the post-bac program that's a part of the Temple, or is that something related to the undergrad? I just want to make sure that I know what you're talking about. If you can just type that in, and I'll come back to that question. But usually, if you're granted an interview for any of these programs, that's kind of the next step. And then after the interview, usually when programs are offering interviews, not like colleges that offer sort of alumni interviews that are not evaluative, I think I said that correctly. But in any sort of medical admissions process, the interview is really crucial in your success, and is always sort of, they want to make sure that they think you're right for the program, and they think that you're going to do well, and they want to meet you in person. So usually for any pre-med, pre-health type of interview process, that they are very much in the running, and they haven't made a definitive selection. Linda asks, if a student took AP Calc and tested out of it, will it be a problem for future med school applications if he does not take Calc in college? So no, at this point, there are some medical schools that require math, but they will take the AP credit for calculus. But there are some medical schools that still want to see some undergraduate math work. So this is why we're recommending students take to statistics or biostatistics. Those are sort of the most common classes that students are going to take if they choose to place out of calculus. They choose to take that AP credit. Sometimes what we recommend to a student is we say, look, don't take the AP credit and take calculus as a freshman, because it'll probably be an easy A for you, while you're adjusting to college. But I don't know where your student is in this process, if that sort of is already a done deal for them. Okay. Yeah. So if you are interested, I just want to bring this up. If you're interested in learning more about us, if you're interested in working with us, please feel free to sign up for a free 15-minute consultation. You will see that. You see that here. And we encourage you to sign up for that, and we'd be happy to speak with you. Will the military fund medical school? Yes, the military can fund medical school, and and you can look into those options. And obviously, you're going to be required to devote some service, to the military if you take advantage of that. What's more advantageous, a year of EMT or clinical experience versus 1 year graduate program geared to medical school, like Indiana University has one? So, this is going to depend very much on the student. Does the student already have clinical experience? Clinical experience is becoming one of those things that medical schools really want to see in their applicants. So, does the student already have clinical experience? Or do they need that in their background? And then in terms of doing a graduate program geared to med school, I'm thinking you're probably referring to what we call a special master's program, which is a program that students can enroll in to enhance their academics. These are typically designed for students who need that academic enhancement, who maybe had an upward trend, had a rough start to college, who maybe weren't very focused initially. So in terms of recommending which would be better, we would need to know a bit more about the student's background and if they need that academic enhancement. We do not recommend students enroll in more academics, another program, unless they need that academic enhancement, or unless the program is in something that relates to the student's specific interest that's already demonstrated and is something that they're going to, sort of do something with in their future career. Is Emory considered selective for pre-med? Well, Emory is definitely a very competitive undergraduate college. And so, from that standpoint, yes, it's selective. I think that's the question you're asking. We certainly work with Emory pre-meds. They do very well in the process. They're well prepared. So we like working with our Emory undergrad pre-meds. So I would say that Emory students do well in the medical school admissions process based on our experience. I think that's what you're asking. Does being part of an honors college carry any weight? So medical school admissions committees know that honors colleges are competitive. So from that standpoint, yes, it's going to carry weight in terms of them understanding that that student was competitive when they were a high school student. I can tell you that med school admissions committees are starting at the point of, from the point of freshman year of college. So they're not looking at the student's high school record. So it's less about sort of being part of that honors college than it is about what they're doing when they are a part of the honors college. And did the student take advantage of all the resources that they had available to them? And did they make an impact, by using those resources? That's what's going to be more important to medical school admissions committees. Okay, another reminder. I'm just following, my assistant in terms of recommending this. If you want to talk to us, sign up for a free 15-minute consultation. We'd love to talk to you. Okay, Brigido, hi, how are you? Aside from soft factors such as location, etc., what would be the more objective factors that a student should consider when deciding what medical school to attend? So the best way to really consider the objective criteria: students are going to med school to be educated. They're going to med school to get a residency, to enter their training program. So the best, most objective criteria that a student can look at, but again, it's not always so easy necessarily to interpret this information, are the match lists. Where are the students matching and what specialties are they matching? Generally speaking, the more competitive medical schools are going to match more students in more competitive residency programs. Those are going to be the surgical subspecialties, ophthalmology, dermatology, radiation oncology. So you want to see what specialties the school is matching the students into, keeping in mind that there are going to be some medical schools that are going to have, very different missions. Some are going to be very focused on primary care, whereas others may not be. But that's when we're trying to help students decide where to attend if they're really between a couple of schools and they don't know where to attend. We're really trying to analyze those match lists in terms of helping them to make that decision. Okay. If you take the MCAT a second time and do better in all sections but mess up cars, how is that regarded? But overall, your score is 4 points up. That's amazing. So we generally recommend you don't retake the MCAT unless you're pretty confident that you can bump the score by 3 or 4 points. Cars is kind of the one section that I don't want to say that you can mess up in, but if your lowest score is in cars, that's kind of okay. That's, versus in one of the sciences, medical school admissions committees are going to be a little more suspect. Now, medical schools do not super score the MCAT the way that colleges super score the SAT and the ACT, but they are going to see every score that the student has received, and they're going to see every subsection score. So I would say that this is a pretty amazing result. If your student retook the MCAT a second time and bumped 4 points, that's terrific. It will not be held against them if they went down slightly in cars. That's okay. Okay. Interview tips if you're interested in our download for interviews, I encourage you to download that. Okay. Lynn asks, if a pre-med has a lower GPA, does a higher MCAT help? So absolutely. And, again, the MCAT is the only, it's hard to sort of, fake an MCAT score. So it depends also what you mean by lower. Sometimes we talk to people and they say, well, I have a kind of a lower GPA, and, they have a 3.75, which is a great GPA, especially depending on what classes you're taking. We're looking at your trend, where were you freshman year, where were you senior year, and, kind of what has been the evolution of your GPA, what classes have you taken. So all of this is going to be looked at in context. It's going to be looked at holistically. But yes, a higher MCAT always helps a student, whether they, have a 4.0 GPA or whether they have a 3.75 GPA. It's always going to help. Absolutely. What about psych stats? I assume that you're asking that with regards to the math requirement. I don't know the answer to that. I would check with your college. Is that considered a math class? And I would also just sort of call a couple of medical schools that require math and ask if that would count as a math requirement to make sure. Okay, sweetheart, I addressed that. I don't know if you asked the question. I think that you asked it in oh no, someone else asked it. I answered the question about the NIH summer internships earlier. And yes, this is a great opportunity to do, especially if the internship is in the student's area of interest, or if it sort of helps to kind of, inspire an interest that the student then goes on to pursue after the internship, most definitely. How do you research med schools? I hear people say some schools don't have many in-person lectures. Some schools are more collaborative. Others have flipped classroom. Some have pass fail, etc. Is there one place where you can find all of this information? So yes, I recommend for allopathic medical schools that you get a subscription to the medical school admissions requirements. I believe it's $36 for 2 years, and you're going to find a ton of information there with regards to the method of teaching and a lot of information about all the medical schools. And then you can also link from there to every medical school, U.S. allopathic medical school in the country, and you're going to be able to find that information. If it's not listed in the MSAR, then you'd have to go to each individual medical school's website to find out that information. And then, of course, you find out everything when you go to revisit days. So if a student has a choice in terms of medical schools, you're going to get all this information when you go to revisit days and talk to actual students. Okay. Ruchi asks, what if my student is admitted to state school like UMich, Wisconsin-Madison, UIUC versus private selective schools like Chicago, Wash U, which have grade deflation and core curriculum requirements? Well, this is tough. I doubt they're admitted to all these schools yet, since we're not yet in RD. But so all of these are schools that are going to position a student for success in the medical school admissions process. We've definitely worked with students from all of these schools. I would not say, just based on our work with students, that all these schools deflate at all. Some of these schools that you've listed here, actually, in our experience, somewhat inflate. And then in terms of core curriculum, that really becomes a personal preference. I mean, U Chicago certainly has a core curriculum, I know, and for some students, they love that. They love that classic education. So that really becomes a personal kind of decision if you want to choose a school that has a core curriculum. But in doing that, you're also going to want to try to figure out, okay, if I enroll at U Chicago, what is my curriculum going to look like over the next 4 years, so that I'm ready to apply to medical school, at the end of 4 years or at the end of 3 years, again, depending on what the preference is. Okay. All right. I'm going to start just sort of skipping ahead because we have a bunch of questions here. Okay. UCLA GPA for junior, senior years is a 4.0. Freshman, sophomore year grades are 3.7. That sounds pretty amazing to me. No worries there. That sounds great. Oftentimes, early GPAs are a little bit lower than junior and senior year grades. Very, very typical pattern. Okay. Is a clinical experience from abroad, i.e. France, not as good as one from the US? Also, my daughter is planning to take a gap year and trying to find clinical experience in the US. How does the actual versus anticipated take into consideration? Okay. So first of all, a clinical experience abroad, it depends on why the student did that experience. Was it a pay-to-play program? Often those are taking place in third world countries. They're not necessarily respected by admissions committees, but I'm assuming that if this experience was in France, that probably was not a pay-to-play program. Does the student have some sort of connection to the country? Why did they do, a clinical experience in France, and what was the experience? So we'd want to know all of that. Of course, medical schools, overall would rather a student have an experience. If I had to sort of pick one versus the other, they'd rather the student have an experience here in the United States, because it's really important to understand how medicine is practiced in the United States. But just because they got the experience abroad, we would need to know why and how and what they did there. In terms of gap year experience, your anticipated hours really matter on the application. So this is why it's great when students, are filling out an application, let's say at the end of their senior year, and they know what they're doing already during their gap year, because on the medical school application, you can enter your anticipated hours for an experience that's either upcoming or that's ongoing. And that certainly is taken into consideration. Absolutely. Is IB diploma good for an application? When it comes to when you apply to medical school, what you did in high school doesn't necessarily matter so much. I can tell you there are going to be a lot of medical school admissions officers who have no idea what an IB diploma is. So it really is about what you're doing as an undergraduate that's going to matter the most. Linda asks, could you speak to study abroad programs and how that looks for medical school? I think that study abroad, I think it's kind of neutral, honestly, when it comes to med school. I mean, is a study abroad year potentially going to lead to further conversation during an interview? Maybe that, if, let's say, your interviewer traveled to the place where you studied abroad, or maybe they studied abroad there as well. But I'd say for most programs, it's going to be fairly neutral. It's not going to be a major plus, but it's also not going to be a minus either. Certainly when I, which was a long time ago, when I was applying to med school, study abroad was a definitive no. And now it's not. I mean, now many students who get into medical school do study abroad. Sometimes it prolongs their path a little bit because we want those prerequisites to be taken at a US institution. So sometimes it can sort of change the timeline a little bit. But in terms of how it looks, it's, neither good nor bad. And it also depends on what you do with it, right? Sometimes students, when they study abroad, they might take specific courses where they're learning about healthcare systems in other countries, and that might relate to their area of interest. So there are ways to kind of make this into something that becomes, kind of a niche for the student. But I'd say that most students do not do that. Okay. Just looking at the questions. So, is that GPA likely to be good enough, or would an additional grad school be better? I'm not sure which GPA we're talking about. If you can just let me know in another comment, that would be great. And just sort of reference this comment so I know what you're talking about. Sorry, I don't see everyone's names by using this software. So that's why I don't always know what the previous question was. I apologize. Okay. Do you have any opinions or insight about FAU Medical School? FAU is a great medical school. We've had students that have gone there. I believe that they are happy, um, but I haven't been in touch with anyone who's actually there. Okay, this was a paid program that WashU had, and she was selected from her school district. Okay, I understand. Well, so if a selective program, depending on the level of competitiveness, that potentially can definitely be something that is worth pursuing. I think that I think that I answered that question correctly. Can you dedicate one live for only DO related information? That's a great idea. Yeah. Let me think about that. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, absolutely. 3.7 from UCLA. That's a very strong GPA. And certainly we would look at everything else that the student had. We would look at their MCAT, we would look at their experiences, letters of recommendation, their overall narrative, their overall story, their interests. But certainly a 3.7 GPA from UCLA is most definitely competitive for medical school. Is it a bad idea to attend new medical schools that are in the accreditation process? I think, first of all, the accreditation process is it's very difficult even to get to like preliminary accreditation where you're allowed to take a medical school class in and enroll students, that I do not see a risk in this. I don't know of any time that a school has not proceeded in the accreditation process once they've been allowed to enroll students. Enrolling in a new medical school can be great or it can be terrible, and it really depends on what kind of person you are. I think it offers a tremendous opportunity to, kind of really impact the education at that school, impact, the future of that school. And you also, you get a lot of attention that way, right? Because there are a lot of people in leadership and on faculty who want to see that medical school succeed. So they want to make those students happy, but of course there are going to be some things that aren't ironed out, that aren't, necessarily kind of working like clockwork. So it kind of depends on what kind of person you are, if that type of environment is going to work for you, or if is it going to be invigorating, or is it going to be frustrating? That's a really personal decision. Is a 3.8 from UVA a good GPA? Yeah, that's a great GPA from UVA. These are all good schools, all of them. So yes, you should definitely have success with that, assuming that you have an MCAT to match. We always talk about sort of the GPA matching the MCAT score, right? So we want an excellent, a 3.8 GPA is outstanding. We want an equally outstanding, we want an equally outstanding MCAT to match that outstanding GPA. So this was a great live. Thank you so much for being here. Again, for those of you who joined us late, my name is Dr. Jessica Freedman. I'm the chair and founder of MedEdit's Medical Admissions. We have these lives every week. Next week, I will not be here on Thursday. I have to figure out which day I'm going to be here. It'll be another day next week. So please stay tuned in our Facebook group for that. If you are not in our Facebook group, please join it. And we will put the link to the Facebook group up in the chat so you can go ahead and request that. Because we post a lot of information there, and you can also ask me questions in the Facebook group that I would be happy to answer. And again, if you have any interest in working with us or learning more about us, please sign up for a free 15-minute consultation. I can, our students are still getting interviews. We had students who literally got, more medical school interviews this week. We are getting a lot of great acceptances. Of course, we have March acceptances. Some of the acceptances come out in bulk. They're coming out in March. And then we have the match coming up in March as well. So a lot happening in the coming, weeks and in the coming month. So if you are not a part of our pre-med parents and students group, please go ahead and join. I'd love to see you in there, and I hope to see you all next week. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, and I hope you all have a terrific weekend. Bye-bye.